YIH.
We want to go through some things. We'll kind of add to some of the things that Ray said. I think it was very important to kind of see some of the background. I thought that was interesting when I first heard Ray's presentation of a lot of the background, how D-Star was really created back a few months ago. But what we'll be doing in this section, we're going to kind of assume that we're going to be addressing a lot of the beginners that are starting. What I always find out in this is some of the people who think they're a little bit more experienced, they may get something out of this too. We're going to cover a lot of material, so in this hour we're going to have a lot of fun with it, and we'll try to keep an eye on some of the chat questions as well, and looking forward to your comments on this. So if we'll bring up the PowerPoint, we'll get started. Thank you. Our technical director, Dr. Cutshaw, back there is giving us a lot of TV hints to smile and things. All right, getting started with this, I'd like to give you a little background of kind of where I'm coming from with this. I'm an emergency coordinator in Aries in Georgia for Gwinnett County, which is one of the suburban Atlanta counties. So I have a real interest in emergency communications, and when I first learned of D-Star, thanks to the guy sitting next to me over here, it was the light went on and said, not only is this a fun technology for amateur radio, but it can also have some great benefits for emergency communications. We'll talk more about that in one of the sessions this afternoon. I want to say very quickly before we start seeing some chat on it, I look at D-Star in terms of emergency communications as another tool in the toolbox. I don't see it as replacing traditional VHF FM or HF or any of the other digital modes, but we look at it, for example, I think as we're starting to deploy this, as another tool in the toolbox. It'll be appropriate for certain situations. It will not be appropriate for others. And then also, we look at it as a digital platform. There were some comments made earlier that it's a closed technology, and I think a lot of the things that Robin has done with D Plus and the DV dongle, DV access point, we'll talk about some other tools and radios and things, hotspots, and other hardware that can be available for it. Don't see this as a closed architecture at all, and it's something that is a digital platform that we can build on for the future. So anyway, let's get back to the presentation here, and starting with an introduction to D-Star. As I was saying, it is an open standard for digital voice and data on amateur radio. And as Ray indicated earlier, it was developed by the JARL, the Japan Amateur Radio League. And one thing I will say about D-Star is it was built for amateur radio. And you see some other digital technologies that have their roots in the commercial side, such as P25, Moto Turbo, and others. Let's get that off of there. How'd that come up? Those had roots in the commercial radio side, and are being, I'll say, ported into amateur radio, and so some of the features are not necessarily compatible or as desirable for amateur radio. He mentioned the AMB vocoder chip from DVSI. Some people will say that that's proprietary. That makes it proprietary, as we talked about and Ray indicated in the last segment, that using a commercially available, inexpensive vocoder chip is an easy way to get that developed, get it in place. There are efforts out there in other technologies to develop open source codecs. They're still being developed, and they have been being developed for a lot of years. And one of the things to always keep in mind is when you go with a software codec, that can add to the processing power requirements of the radio itself. So having an off-the-shelf vocoder that is commercially proven, I think is a real asset for it. ICOM, of course, is the first manufacturer with base, mobile, handheld, and repeater equipment. And I think that's been a thing that has stalled some of the digital development. Earlier he mentioned Alenco. I remember that several years ago. they came out with a set of handhelds. It wasn't an open standard. It was proprietary to them, and you only had one radio. So I only know of one person that actually bought one of those, and two of those, and he actually is sitting next to me here.
But they work really, really nicely.
They work very well. You could talk to each other on that. So having a full complement of equipment, I think, is a real advantage and has helped grow D-Star. And now you see other vendors offering products. You see, we'll talk about some of that. You'll see boards which will allow GMSK modem work to create hotspots or even other repeaters. Ray talked about this a little bit. In its most basic form, you're converting to digital modulation, and you're transmitting over the air at 4,800 bits per second. And that is made up of 2,400 bits for voice. Another 1,200 bits is forward error correction on the voice only. So a total of 3,600 bits are devoted to the voice stream, and with the forward error correction, that allows you to faithfully recreate that voice even at low signal levels. Now the 1,200 bits for data, I always hear information or comments that there's no error correction on the data, and so that makes it very difficult to use. You'll see some applications that use the error correction, so that's done in things like DRATs and some others, and that takes care of the error correction when you're doing file transfer and message. And we'll be demoing that in the afternoon session. One thing about a D-Star that's always very attractive, Ray mentioned this a little while ago, its occupied bandwidth fits into the narrow band mask of 6.25 kilohertz. Some people will say that P25 and Moto Turbo, while they're very good technologies, they'll call them 6.25 kilohertz equivalent, but actually they are transmitting 2 time slots in a 12.5 kilohertz channel. So they call it 6.25 kilohertz equivalent. But for example, on the field side, the mobile or the handheld, they're only transmitting in 1 time slot, but it is still occupying the 12.5 kilohertz channel, just like FM voice. Now that doesn't mean that you can put 2 repeater channels in an area, in the same area, in the space that you would normally be putting 1 repeater channel, but that does give you twice the number that could occupy within a larger area. So it does, with the spectral efficiency, allow you to put more repeaters over an area with the 6.25 kilohertz signal. It can operate, D-Star can operate in either simplex, repeater, or linked mode to other repeaters. And that's important because another one of those myths that get just talked about all the time is that D-Star is dependent upon the internet. I look at it from an emergency communications point of view, that most of the disasters or needs to provide communications to support emergency management and other served agencies occur at a local level. And so just like traditional communications, if I can link outside of my area, and internet outages are usually confined to a local area, rarely a larger geographic area. But if the internet goes out, okay, I still have my local repeater, and that can operate over my county or a wider area. Repeaters go out too, just like they do in commercial and in FM, and I can still operate in simplex mode with all the features that D-Star presents with voice and data. Alright, what can D-Star do? Transmit or receive voice and 1200 baud data simultaneously in the 2 meter, 440, and 1.2 gigahertz band. Now that's going to be important to show that no TNC is required because you have a direct serial port into the ICOM radios. Going up to 1.2 gigahertz, you also have the capability of doing 128 kilobit data transmission, which is nice because it is essentially imitating an Ethernet bridge. So whether you use that for last mile connectivity or into a data module on a repeater to have internet access, that is a very handy feature and has a lot of applications. DPRS, which is the digital form of APRS, can provide with either external GPS inputs to radios or a GPS microphone, or in the new ID31 and the brand new ID51, the GPS radio is contained within the radio itself. Nothing external is needed, so that position data can automatically be transmitted. The repeater linking gives you the flexibility to link to a distant repeater or through a reflector, which will act as a conference bridge, link to multiple repeaters with only one data stream leaving your repeater locally. There are 58, we're actually up to reflector 58 now. There's a couple of holes in there, but worldwide we're up to reflector 58. And we'll talk about where you can see more about that information on reflectors and repeaters. And then, of course, I think in our session coming up after the roundtable, Robin will be here to talk about the DV dongle, DV access point. We'll talk about DV node adapters, which allow voice and data access to the D-Star network via the internet connection. But you don't necessarily have to have a D-Star radio for some of these modes to be able to operate. D-Star does continue to grow. I keep having to update this slide whenever we make this presentation, and you'll see for the last 5 years, and we'll soon be adding 2012, and you see the curve continuing to grow. But I updated this slide with the information just a few days ago, with 58 reflectors, 1,009 gateways, and estimating over 2,000 repeaters, and over 25,000 registered users on D-Star worldwide. So the technology continues to grow, and the infrastructure out there continues to grow as well. Reflectors and Nets. With 58 reflectors available worldwide, each one of these reflectors acts as a conference bridge, actually multiple conference bridges. And so within each reflector there's an A, B, C, D, and E module. The A, B, C, and D, for convenience, are contained under one reflector designation. So you'll have reflector 30 Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, or Delta, A, B, C, and D, that can act as separate conference bridges. So you can have 4 separate linked networks on those separate bridges for each one of those reflectors. E was implemented in a recent release as an echo function. So if you're connecting with a DV dongle, a DV access point, or a node adapter directly to a reflector and want to know how your signal, what is your audio quality, what does your signal sound like, you can connect to the E module of a reflector and you can play back. You'll transmit, release, and then it will play back your last transmission. So you can see testing microphones for audio quality or signal strength. Are you getting into a repeater or a reflector with the E module? And that function is also available locally on the repeaters. You'll see that there are regional, national, and international nets have been established with reflectors. If you go to www.dstarinfo.com and look at the reflectors tab, you can see where the reflectors are worldwide. You will see information on them, and you'll see a little bit that many of them have a certain flavor. They may be Italian speaking receiver or reflector. It may be for emergency communications in an area. It may be defined for a specific area. Reflector 30C, or Reflector 30, which I'll mention, started out as a Georgia-based repeater, a reflector. it has grown in popularity, even though its primary function is still to support emergency communications should they be needed in Georgia. It has become one of the most popular reflectors out there, along with Reflector 1C. You see a French language Swiss for Swiss and French users with Reflector 5. You see Reflector 6A is a Scottish net, 6C is a German net, Reflector 8, the Japan G2 repeaters, and so on and so on. So if you'll go to dstarinfo.com and the Reflectors tab, you can see what all the reflectors are. And tune around. Connect your local repeater or your DV access point or dongle to some of the reflectors and listen around. It's a great way to work DX and also meet a lot of folks on DSTAR.
Just a second, let me bring something up right quick. I'll go to status page on Reflector right quick so you can see what's on there.
Another thing that you can do is if you want to see the gateway page, every one of the reflectors and also repeaters, you can go to their gateway page, and if you'll look up at the top, the format for this is you'll put in your browser the reflector number in the format of REF and 3 digits for the reflector .dstargateway.org, and you'll get a dashboard page, and you can see all of the 5 modules A, B, C, D, and E, and you can see what is connected to each one of those. Now we're showing Reflector 30, which Reflector 30C is obviously very popular. You see dozens of repeaters that are connected to them. Then you also, below that, see remote users. These are people that are connected with hotspots, DV access points, or DV dongles directly to a reflector. And then you have a last heard list. So of the people that are connected to a reflector, you'll see their call signs. Also, you can look at a particular repeater itself by substituting, instead of the REF and 3 digits, the call sign of that repeater. So if you put in WD4STR, which is a repeater in Lawrenceville, Georgia, first off you can see is the repeater linked to a certain reflector, and you'll see that our B module, which is our primary one, our UHF one on this repeater, is linked to Reflector 30C, and C, which is our 2 meter module, is linked to Reflector 30D. I'll mention just a little bit about the D modules. Although they're open for anyone to use, we've kind of been throwing out the suggestion that you may want to use the D modules on reflectors for data. It's not an absolute requirement, but for example on Reflector 30D, we do use that for data connectivity. And as we get into our discussion about data this afternoon, we'll talk about that a little bit more.
So why is the repeater C linked to the reflector D? Doesn't that not make sense?
That's a good question. Remember that the designations for repeaters are standardized in every place but Japan. That A is the 1.2 gigahertz module, B is the UHF, and C is the VHF 2 meter module. When you get to reflectors, they were given A, B, C, and then D and E for convenience, but that does not designate that only 2 meter repeaters, for example, can connect to the C module, or only UHF to a B module. So reflector designations are purely for convenience, but you will see that repeaters A, B, and C are designated for 1.2, UHF, and VHF respectively.
So what's a D on a repeater?
We just talked about that. D can be a separate, just a fourth reflector module conference bridge to connect to, but then we've kind of been using it on Reflector 30, and I think some of the other reflectors.
I'm talking on the repeater, not the reflector, on a repeater.
Well, why don't you answer that question?
So D is the fourth module on a repeater, which very few people have actually implemented the fourth module. So you will not normally see the fourth module or the D module on a lot of repeaters. You'll just normally see the B and C primarily, the 440 and the 2 meters. The A will be the 1.2 gigs generally. The E is the echo for the repeaters. In Japan, they go a little bit different at times, so the A, B, and C might be not necessarily corresponding to the 442 meters and 1.2 like it is in the rest of the world. Hang on a second, we've got Ray wanting to add a comment to this. And here's Ray.
Well, one of the things with the Japanese repeaters, earlier I mentioned
Just hang on a second. Okay, go now.
One of the things on the Japanese repeaters, when I mentioned earlier the JARL or large clubs own the repeaters, not individuals. One of the other things that we discovered is they do not have 2-meter repeaters in Japan. It's only 1.2 and UHF.
So that messes up the rest of the world, but the rest of the world, except for Japan, generally prescribes to the concept that the A is 1.2, the B is 440, the C is 2 meters. But that doesn't mean it has to be that way. We've got some folks with a B and a D, both of them are 440, I think. So they can change around a little bit. So the D is not commonly used, but it is there.
And I was asleep in the corner, but did you cover when they're using the DV module and the DD module on 1.2? Both of those have to be A?
No, I didn't, but that's a good one.
So that's
You'll see those listed. What Ray's saying on that is we think of it in terms of voice. So you have, for example, WD4STRA is always going to be 1.2, but it will also be 1.2 voice and 1.2 data. D-Star sorts it out if you're transmitting the high-speed data that it goes to the correct module. And in the 4 modules that are defined, if you hear the term a stack or a full stack, that would be a complement of a controller, which will then control up to 4 modules, and a full stack would be 4 RF modules, usually a C module for VHF, a B module for UHF, an A module for 1.2 voice, and an A module for 1.2 high-speed data or DD mode.
Well, I haven't seen anybody be ambitious enough to do it. You can put 2 VHF modules, 2 UHF modules,
sure,
and get a full stack that way, and use port A, B, C, and D.
You could. So it could be, since you're transmitting from a single site, it becomes more difficult to transmit 2 modules or 2 repeaters in the same band, but it could be done. So you can do that. If we'll switch back to the PowerPoint, talk just a little bit about what radios are available. And these are the commercial radios from ICOM. You have a 70 centimeter only portable, the ID31A, which was introduced a little over a year ago. That one is the newer user interface. It has built-in GPS, so that works. That you can, in fact, we were showing one.
Right? Can you pull
a minute ago?
Radio next to you there, the one with the cord in it? Yeah, that's a third. Yeah, that's a 31 there. Don't you dare throw that.
That's not a 30. That's a 80.
Which one's that? The 80?
You've got a 31 here.
No, there's not. That's not. Oh, 31, the new one.
Okay. 31.
31.
They got a 31 in the
You slept, yes. You're gonna have. I woke it up, but you got to password it. Excuse us while we go through the technical difference.
Computer.
You saw an ID31A in the earlier presentation. That was the first one that had the different user interface, and because it has built-in GPS, you can just pull up a screen that says nearest repeater, and because you have a large database included on the SD card, GPS will tell you where it is, the database that you download for it or have out of the box has the position information, so you go into Memphis as we are here, say nearest repeater, and W4LET comes up. Go to another city and it will show you the nearest repeater, how far you are away from it. So it simplifies the programming quite a bit, and that's kind of the new interface that's reflected in the ID31A, and you will see also duplicated in the ID51A, which, as Ray said, will be available sometime in January. If you go back to other portables, you had the 2 meter 70 centimeter dual band portable that was the ID 80. Do we have an 80 somewhere on the set here? This was the one that was introduced a few years ago. It is dual band, but it is a single receive channel, so you can operate both bands, 2 meters and 440, but only one at a time.
And the microphone supports GPS on this one.
And the microphone, there is an additional microphone that will give you the GPS mic, speaker mic, that can be attached to it, so you can use it for the position information.
And don't forget the first generation of E82, U82, and 2200 that you could add the board to it, which are great utility radios for those out in the field doing search and rescue.
And the model numbers on those again are?
The IC-V82, the IC-U82, and the IC-2200.
Very good, very good. And I'm going to say about 2 years ago, correct me, Ray, if I'm wrong, the IC-92AD came out, which is again, it's a dual band, but also dual receive, so you can simultaneously receive both 2 meter and 70 centimeter. Only one of those can be a D-Star channel at a time. But before I forget any of this, all of the radios that we're showing you here can operate both FM and D-Star modes. So you don't have to you're not buying a D-Star only radio if you buy these. You can operate on your standard FM repeaters.
And you can notice on this one that it's currently listening to the 442.75 FM repeater, but the W4LET D-Star repeater.
And moving on, the brand new one mentioned the ID51A, which is like the ID31A, which we have one of the non-working models here. You'll see that in about another month. I'm looking forward to it as well. This is dual band, and like the 92AD, it is dual band, dual receive. Again, operating only one, either VHF or UHF, can be D-Star and the other one analog, but you can have either in single display or in dual display. You can monitor 2 repeaters at the same time, one being FM, both being FM, or one being FM and one D-Star. Now in the mobiles, and we don't really have many of the mobiles here that we can show you, there are of the full D-Star capable radios, the ID888H. It is a successor to the 800H, and it is a dual band FM and D-Star, and it is a single receive at a time. The IC2820, which is kind of the full featured mobile, it is dual band, dual receive, the larger display, so you can do 2 channels at one time, again, 1 D-Star, 1 FM, or 2 FM. And they have the D-Star module included. Now with the 2820, you also get GPS on the board, and it comes with an external GPS antenna. So you can see that. We're going to show you that from the ICOM website. This is the 2820 radio. As you can see, a little larger display, so you get the full benefit of that. It is a detachable display, so you can locate it separately from the base of the radio. And it is a wideband receiver as well, so you can receive weather channels and aircraft and other features as well with that. Now let me move to the ID1. It is a 1.2 gigahertz, the 23 centimeter band only, but it will do FM, it will do the digital voice DV mode, and it will do the DD mode, the high speed data as well. And we'll show some applications. We've got 3 of them in the room here. We'll show how they can be configured and used. Some people just use them as a mobile or a base radio, but they can also be used in some kind of fixed or semi-portable type configurations. Flip the little switch on the side there between the router. Well, you can do that too. We're going to show you, this is the configuration that I built up for kind of field use. You see the ID1 at the top left. The display is connected to it. If you already have things programmed up the way you want, you don't have to have the display on it. I configured this to be kind of a standalone field unit. It's gone through a couple of iterations, but you see the ID1 at the top left. There is a power supply, 15 amp power supply that's under the shelf, the lower left there that it's pointing to. What you can't see behind the center under the shelf there is it has an Astron BB30, I think is the model number for it, where you can connect a battery and a 12-volt power supply, and it will switch over between them. It's the two diodes in there, so that if your power supply fails or you have only battery, then it will work for that. And then I have a little bit of a power pole distribution module in front of that. I also have, well, behind on the lower right under the shelf, there's a position for two 9 amp hour batteries that you typically see like in UPS modules. I only have one in there right now, but that would give me up to 18 amp hours of capacity within it. Right now I only have one in there. The ID1 at full power of 10 watts draws 7 amps, I believe is the spec, but that would last quite a while. And the top right, you see one of the most popular routers that was ever made. Thank you, Vanna. Nice fingers there. That's the Linksys WRT54GL. And the GL module is the Linux-based one. It is very, very popular. Boy, I wish they still made those. You can find them on eBay, and occasionally you can find them on the shelf in a store. A lot of people are replacing the firmware in those with DDWRT, which is available free on the internet, or there's some other firmware that can be loaded in as well. The DDWRT adds a lot of capabilities. It also lets you run the power up on those, which you have to be very careful about that because you don't want to burn up the RF in those routers, but gives you a lot of capabilities as well.
One comment from the Peanut Gallery over here. You do have a group of the fan club that is saying you're not talking about the 9100 and what it can and cannot do on 1.2.
We'll talk about the 9100. The 9100 is a recent release radio that is HF and well, what all bands is within the 9100? Is it just through 6 meters, 160 through 6 meters, Ray?
2 meter 440.
2 meter and 440 is also included in the 9100. I like what KQ4KK said, that someone give John a 9100 so he'll mention it. I don't have one.
Kent's got one, doesn't he?
Kent has one. I know a lot of people that have 9100s. They like them. They will operate standard modes in HF, but they will also operate D-Star in the bands. And there are some questions about D-Star emission in there, but so far I don't think anyone's been cited for it. We can talk about that. I see also there's a comment in there, they have a WRT54G with version 1.1 DDWRT. The DDWRT software firmware is available for a lot of different models, so you don't have to use the GL that I'm using, but you can use it for another. On the 9100, I see Angelo is saying he loves it on HF, VHF, and UHF. You can also add the 1.2 module to it, so it can actually operate practically DC to light, 160 through 6 meters on the standard HF and getting into VHF, and then 2 meter 440. And if you add the 1.2 to it also.
But the 1.2 does not do the high-speed data.
It will not. It is only the 1.2 voice. Okay. Looking at some of the chat comments there as well. So I think we covered all of the radios that are available.
We got one more. Might as well go ahead and show the picture while we're here.
Oh, yes, the new one. And we also have one over there as well. Also being released is a new radio, the IC 7100, which is kind of a new look to the IC 7000. It has a new, very interesting display. Front panel, a sloped front panel that is a monochrome touchscreen. And you're seeing just the front panel from it. The base unit to it is over on our shelf over here, but you see it actually powered up. It's going to be available in also the January time frame. Is that correct? Or no, a little later on out. But there's a new radio coming out, and it is also, it's HF, but it is also D-Star capable as well. I see a comment, how much is the new 51? We'll be getting to that with my next slide. But a lot of good features on the 7100. All right, let's talk about a little bit of cost. And this is always a point that gets a lot of discussion in D-Star. One of the comments out there is always that D-Star radios are more expensive. You had another comment over there?
One of the questions that just popped up in the forum, and I want to send it to you before it scrolls off. There's a question about the power supply battery auto switch just mentioned. So this one will be for you, John. What is the auto battery power supply switch that you're using in your kit?
Yeah, the one I'm using, there's a couple of them that are out there. One is from West Mountain Radio that is called a Power Gate. I'm using a scaled down version of that. It's the Astron BB30, I believe is the model number of it. It's quite a bit less expensive, but it doesn't have, it has charging capability for the battery, but it does not have the smart charging capability that the West Mountain Radio Power Gate has. I use the West Mountain Power Gate at home on my shack because I want to be able, I'm charging a 90 amp hour battery with it, and it has a very intelligent charging scheme. This just has basically a diode and a resistor across to charge the battery. But in a scaled down version, it works very well. I see a comment, what will be the cost of the 7100? Ray, you want to comment on that?
Actually, with both the radios not being FCC certified, I can't comment on any pricing.
Okay. Even though we have it in here on the 51, as we'll show. Speculation. Okay. All right. Cost. If you look at the portables, they run anywhere from, and these are suggested retail prices, I believe. No, they're actually some street prices, I think, that you're seeing in there. The 31, under $400, all the way up to the 92, which is in the high 500 range. Where the ID51A, as I was told a minute ago, the speculation on its suggested retail price will be $629. If we go to the mobiles, you see those are a little bit more expensive. The 880, just under 500, all the way up to the 2820, which it's more expensive radio, but you are getting quite a bit of capabilities built into it. And the ID1 also is a 1.2 radio.
Robin.
Which one?
This one.
Ed in the chat room asked if you could go ahead and continue explaining what you use the ID1 for in the field.
I'd like to talk about, if we could hold off on that until we get into our afternoon session. That should be, let me see, around 2 o'clock. But I just very briefly, I'll answer your question in case you can't be around. I use this in the field to give me remote internet access. We have actually used this package to fly it in an airplane to take airborne photos and then send them back over the high-speed DD link to be able to send medium resolution photos back in a near real time, but it could be used as a last mile. If you had two ID1s, they could go from your last point that your network extends to a few miles out for last mile, or you can connect through a repeater. We have one in our Aries mobile communications trailer that can give us 128 kilobit internet access when we're in the field, because we can put an antenna up on a mast. So hope that answers your question of how it can be used. I did want to, as you saw in the photo, it's sitting on top of its Pelican case, and I saw someone mention that in the chat a little while ago also. It can operate within the Pelican case. We took it out so you can see all the components of it. Continuing on back with our comparisons on these, one of the things that always comes up is saying D-Star radios are expensive, but look at the capabilities that you get with a D-Star radio. It is capable of voice and data. If you had to compare that with a setup, and I'm talking new for new, you would, to duplicate the capabilities of, let's say, a D-Star mobile, such as an 880, you would have to buy two radios, one for voice, one for data, and then also purchase a TNC to run APRS, any type of packet, any type of information like that, and even a GPS to go along with it. So if you look at the capabilities that you're getting, incrementally the price is going to be a little bit more expensive. One of the questions I always get as an emergency communicator, I'll get new hams coming into Aries, and they'll say, what kind of radio should I buy? I used to say make sure that you get a dual band radio, because you're going to need to operate on more than just 2 meters, which can be the tendency by the least expensive radio you can get. I now tell people you may want to consider buying a D-Star radio, even though you may not want to use D-Star today. Incrementally, it's a little bit more money, but you may regret having bought an FM-only radio and then go, ooh, I'd like to get on D-Star, and then have to buy another radio that has both FM and D-Star. So if you're new out there, or in our audience today that you're considering getting a radio, even though D-Star may or may not be for you today, please consider that. I have some people in our Aries group that they've not yet been on D-Star, but they went ahead and bought a D-Star capable radio. So as a comparison between that, what you're getting, bang for the buck, you get quite a bit for it. Let's talk a little bit about getting started. One of the main things that you'll want to look at is where are D-Star repeaters? And unfortunately, some of the frequency coordinating bodies were not very good about designating which repeaters were D-Star. Hopefully in the new directory that will come out in 2013, because D-Star has become quite a bit more popular, you'll see a lot more information contained in the ARRL repeater directory that indicates that. However, right now, today, go to dstarinfo.com, and you have a very, very comprehensive list of repeaters, including the maps, which here's an indication, a screenshot off of the site. If you go to dstarinfo.com, go to repeaters, and look at the repeater tab, repeater list it's called, and you see several options there for you. One is repeater maps, and you can go by area or by state, and you visually see where the repeaters are located. You can also pull down a nearest repeaters to you by just putting in a city. For example, we'll put in Atlanta, Georgia to that list, and it will show a map of the ones within, let's say, about 100 miles. And you see all of them in kind of the north and middle Georgia area, as well as those getting over into Alabama. And then if you look a little further down, you can highlight one of the selections of the repeaters there.
So it shows the distances from your location to each one of them.
So very good listing there. It will also give you the memory downloads within the repeater list. We're going to talk about that a little bit and show a demo of that in our roundtable session coming up in the next hour. Another resource is dstarusers.org. It provides a last heard, and this is something that is always amazing to see. When the last heard list came out first several years ago, I think it showed a 24-hour, was that correct, a 24-hour listing of the last heard, or even longer than that, because there weren't that many D-Star transmissions, so you could go 24, 48 hours and see who came up when and on what repeater and what area they were in.
I'll probably get pinged here from N5MIJ, but I think the very first one was a weekly time, and within the first 6 months it went from weekly to a 24-hour period.
And now it looks like it's down to 1 hour.
I would think so. We're seeing a growth rate of about 2,000 to 2,500 new registries on U.S. route. Granted, there's fragmentation and there's other trust servers out there, as well as other gateway solutions, but that's just on the U.S. route network.
You see here on the graph growth from 20K up to about 28K in just this year.
So D-Star does continue to grow, and the last heard page on dstarusers.org is a great way to see who's on and who's just keyed up, as it said in the last few minutes. It also has a repeater directory. It may not be quite as up to date as what's on dstarinfo.com, and there's some other information that comes along with that one, but it is another repeater directory source for you as well. Now, there is an iPhone app that uses I think the repeater directory in dstarusers.org, but it is an iPhone app that just gives you that directory capability within that as well. But remember, with the ID 31 and coming with the ID 51, you can select nearest repeater and see if it will. We're not getting that video up. There we go. You can select nearest repeater and it will give you that list. Now, another point, and we'll go into more of this when we're talking about the downloads. It comes out of the box with a set of a directory listed, but that repeater directory is going to be outdated almost immediately when it's loaded, and this was from about a year ago. I think that it comes preloaded from ICOM. However, because it has an SD card in the unit, you can update the directory anytime you want with downloads from the dstarinfo.com website.
You can also see here, barely see on the bottom line, that the repeater, the closest repeater here, is the W4LET-B repeater, which is 2.7 miles from the location. So if there was more in this area, you'd see them listed here. But it shows you the distance, and there's a little icon out there which is kind of hard to see that shows you the direction also that the repeater is from you. So basically, you can take this radio, pop up just about anywhere in the world, turn it on, let the GPS acquire signal, then come in and just ask it where the nearest repeater is, and you're on the line. You're online with it.
I did get a question or a comment here from Jim, who's in the chat room and watching. And this was a test that we used to do when we would do the early days of presentations. And that is, if you want to see the activity, when you go to the last heard page on dstarusers.org, chunk your local repeater and then look at how far down the list you show up on. Yeah. Because that is a real-time representation of all the users across all the D-Star systems that are connected to U.S. route, which is a little bit different than what might happen in a specific reflector.
Whose radio is that? Yeah, it must be Robin's radio, because if you'll bring up that screen, Ed just keyed with Robin's radio, so you see AA4RC, and he's going to refresh the screen. He's showing up there, but let's just wait a few seconds and refresh and see how far down the list he moves, which is showing all the D-Star activity around. As you can see, he moved about 10 down the list, I'm guessing, just in the last 10 seconds. So the point Ray was making there, that a lot of D-Star activity is shown, and that's a real handy tool on the dstarusers.org page to be able to see activity around the world, really, with that. All right, if we can go back to the PowerPoint. Getting on the air, sometimes people say D-Star is too complex. With the kind of the newer generation of radios, and we'll call that the 31A, the 51A, and the 7100, turn on the radio, turn on your GPS, enter the DR mode, select near repeater. It automatically programs the information that you need. All you have to do is enter your call sign. And another thing we need to mention with that, we'll talk about registration, but if you just select the your call function in there, you're on the air. You're ready to go because the repeaters are already programmed in there that you can find. We will talk about, and I think a good place to do that might be in the roundtable session coming up here top of the hour, about D-Star registrations. A lot of questions always come up about registrations. Kind of as a final thought on this, as we close out this session, we are becoming a lot more of a digital world. Right now, you see a lot of merging of the radio world and the internet world. The internet is not killing ham radio. It's bringing a lot of new capabilities, and so those who we first heard this with Echolink and IRLP, that this is not ham radio because it's using the internet. It is bringing us some great new features, and if you look, most media is now digital in terms of documents, spreadsheets, databases, pictures, and most of the commercial radio out there, even broadcast radio and television is television has gone totally digital, and radio with HD radio is even out there with that. Interoperability, that's always a buzzword that people think, oh, interoperable, we can talk to everyone. But it is a whole lot more difficult to achieve. Just ask the public safety folks about that as well, even though they may be in a common mode. But the digital information makes interoperability a lot more possible. And I'll say this also from my wearing my ARES and emergency communications or emergency coordinator hat. If you look at the capability that a lot of the served agencies have, police, fire, safety, they do a whole lot more than voice right now. They have the mobile data terminals in their vehicles, so they're using email, live video, web interfaces to that. So if hams are walking in and saying, I'm here to help you, and the only thing you can provide is voice, and that may even be analog voice, then they're going to say, well, can you do this? Can you get me to the internet? Or can you send this file between these locations? And this is one thing that D-Star can bring to the table. If you can show that you are providing a lot of capabilities that they are used to, it creates a good place for amateur radio serving these served agencies as well. So that's really about it for our talking about some of the basics of D-Star. We're going to have a roundtable discussion, and everyone will be joining in here at the table, and we'll be watching the chat. We'll get into a few subjects, and we'll also be very interested in your comments, and we'll try to address as many of the questions as we can. So I guess we'll take a little bit of a break here and let us get back to the roundtable, and we appreciate everybody hanging with us for D-Star Live here today from W5KUB.com, here live from Memphis. We'll be back in just a few minutes at top of the hour and start our roundtable discussion.